Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. Hi, Bonnie.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm glad you could make it nice and bright and early. To all of our viewers, thank you so much for coming. This is quite a cool topic, and we have an amazing giveaway that we're going to share with you in a minute. So if you're joining us, let me know where you are in the world and what you're up to. And today, we also want to know if you are a veterinarian. So pop that in the comments and let us know. We are going to be chatting about acupuncture and about the CRI course on acupuncture. So I am getting a little error here. Can you guys hear and see us? If you're listening, if you're watching, let me know. StreamYard's just throwing up an error that it's having trouble streaming to Facebook. Okay. Let me know, guys. Hi. Okay, so let me regain my thoughts there. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We have Bonny Wright today, and she's one of CRI's lecturers, so the Canine Rehab Institute, and her focus is anesthesiology and pain, but also acupuncture. So that's what we're going to be chatting about today. But before we dive into the topic, and while you guys are all still coming on live and joining us, I want to know from you, Bonny. We're asking everyone this question, and with good reason. Our Vet Rehab Summit theme for the year is research meets reality. So, Bonny, and to all our viewers, please pay attention to this question because it's going to be important. Bonny, what is the research article that you quote most often, or that's made the biggest impact on your practice or way of thinking?
I think I'll go back to a paper from 2012 that talks about the neural acupuncture unit. It's by Dr. Zhang, Zhang, in Evidence-Based Complementary and Alternative Medicine from 2002. And in this article, he's just talking about the physiology of the peripheral nervous system, essentially, and looking at the neurologic underpinnings of these acupuncture points. And for me, that was a huge jumping off place to really focus on all physiology. But in anesthesia, we focus a lot on the spinal cord and the brain and receptors that are in there. And that was really the first article that really drew my attention more to the peripheral nervous system. And now I think I have a number of things that I do in pain medicine that actually work through that peripheral compartment, not just acupuncture, but things like ice and stretching and massage and laser. So it was really kind of an awakening into looking more at the peripheral nervous system and how then that interfaces with the central nervous system. So I think it's a really great, just kind of fundamental basic science article.
Okay, so a really exciting start. We have one viewer here who is a veterinarian. Hi, thanks for joining us. I'm really glad you could make it. So it looks like our broadcast is only going out to the small animal group and not onto our Facebook page. So we'll have to share it there once we're done here. Unless one of my team is available and listening. Guys, help if you are, but I don't think there is a member of our team here. So we'll be just streaming in the small animal vet rehabbers group for now, and we'll share this out afterwards. So that question leads us to the next point, right? Let me just change us back to the correct background here. My next question for you guys is, or my next point to raise, is that the CRI is sponsoring or giving away a $250 voucher towards the first module of their next, the next or the following, I think is also fine, acupuncture course. So the next one starting in October, and then the one after that, the module one, will be in March next year. And that's a $250 discount. So this course is for veterinarians only. But if you're interested and you're a veterinarian and you would love to get in on this voucher, then I would like to know from you, we would like to know from you, what is the research article that has really impacted your thinking or your practice? If it's related to acupuncture, great. If it's not, that's okay as well. We're just thinking evidence-based here. And pain management is a big part of that. So pain management is a great path to think down as well. So let us know what that research article is, and also let us know why you want to add acupuncture to toolbox, why you would like to do the CRI module on Acu. So Bonnie, will you tell us a little bit more about both yourself and the course that the CRI is offering on acupuncture?
Yeah, absolutely. So my path to acupuncture is because I am an anesthesiologist, and in anesthesia we treat a lot of acute pain, but we often get drawn into chronic pain consults as well, because of our understanding of drugs and that pharmacophysiology. And as I got drawn more and more into more of the chronic pain cases, I felt like I needed more tools in my toolbox. So I took a science-based acupuncture course that was at that time offered through Colorado State University, and was really impressed by what I saw. And so then I started teaching for that course and had to really start delving into what is the research and science behind it, because in my world, I need that in order to talk about what I'm doing as an educator and as a board specialized person. I really need to come from a science background. And the more I read about it and learned about it, the more I thought, well, this is just like the drugs. It's just I'm using a non-drug in order to interact with the same physiology that I've studied all these years in anesthesia. So that really took me off. Kind of my mission in life now is to help people see the connection between what they're doing with pharmacology and what they're doing with non-pharma sorts of treatments. And of course, acupuncture is a real big one there. So that was really my path to get there. I think there's actually a really strong amount of science behind acupuncture. We get some limitations when it comes to proving that in the sorts of trials we like to use to prove things, because of a whole bunch of things that basically surround the use of placebos and what a placebo really is. So I know we're going to talk about that later, but it's really a vast pool of science and really fascinating. So I eventually came around to offering this class through the Canine Rehab Institute, and it is a 3-module class. It's 120 hours. There's a lot of really hard science in it. And then we do the 3 modules, have a portion online and a portion in person. We do the in-person portion over a 3-day weekend, 3 different times, and then we treat cases in between. So it's a really good course. I think our students leave really well prepared to start acupuncturing really after the first module, because I require them to. So it's been super fun to actually send a new group of scientifically trained veterinary acupuncturists out into the world.
My goodness, I love that. That just gives me goosebumps, because you're so right. Like, when we know the pain pathways, when we know the physiology and the neurology, which I admit is not my area of strength, but it's really exciting because it's so hard. We start to see the connections, right? Like,
Yeah.
how all the different modalities kind of overlap and address different areas of the same thing, and it's just so exciting. So guys, if you're just joining us, welcome. We're chatting about acupuncture, but we actually have a really cool giveaway today. The Canine Rehab Institute is giving away a $250 voucher to the first module of their next acupuncture course, or the one after that if you cannot start now. And that starts in October, and then the one after starts in March of next year. So really, really exciting opportunity. It is for veterinarians only, but if you're interested, if you're keen to stand a chance to win this, let us know. Give us a shout out in the comments and say, me, I'm interested. And what we'd love to know from you is, let us know what the evidence is that excites you. What is the research that you've read or would love to refer to, or that really gets you thinking and processing things potentially in a bit of a different way from what you're used to. Let us know what that is, and also why you'd love to add acupuncture to your toolbox. I'm sure the two are going to be related. So, all right, so you've given us some really cool things already to think about. So let's start with the evidence. We're chatting about evidence, so let's start with the evidence basis for the use of acupuncture. You've said there's quite a bit, but there's also, if I just do a quick PubMed search, I see a lot that basically says to me, there is no difference between Acu and something else, or sham. So chat to us about what's available and what kind of trends there are in the research.
Absolutely. And I actually, if you are interested in this conversation, I have a podcast and a couple of recent articles where I delve into this. And so if you want to hear the podcast where I talk about this. It's called Pain, Neurobiology, Beauty, and Big Cats. It's by Logical. I also wrote an article last year for the Veterinary Clinics of North America on acupuncture for the treatment of animal pain. And I have a Journal of American Holistic Veterinary Medicine article on acupuncture for the treatment of neuromuscular conditions. So if you're curious about this conversation, I'd encourage you to look at those, because I talk a lot more about the science behind each thing in those articles. But where we have a lot of strength in our acupuncture research is physiologic-based studies. And on the tier of evidence-based medicine, we've got kind of the first two tiers well covered with acupuncture, and there's really hundreds of papers looking at mechanisms and how that interrelates with treatment. When you get on PubMed and you see these studies that compare acupuncture to other treatments, it gets really complicated really fast. And part of that is that we have thought about placebos for most of my career as a really simple, inert thing. You give a pill that's a sugar pill, you give another pill, they match, and you see which one works better or worst. But it turns out that placebos are actually this really complex concept. And if the pill is purple instead of blue, you actually see a much larger placebo effect. And so there's all of these ways of modifying how effective a placebo is. And so there's this realization that placebos aren't even really inert at all. And if you are now doing a study comparing a placebo, even if it's a pill, to a non-placebo, just even the trappings of the study create all of these changes and help explain some of why drugs seem to not work as well once they're released out of these big studies, because you're no longer in the trappings of this grand event that has its own placebo effects. So there's an author named Kapchuk, Kaptchuk, I think, whose job for the NIH is, or the NIH funds his research on placebos. And as you're trying to understand why acupuncture doesn't turn out well in these placebo-controlled studies, I think understanding his work is phenomenally important. So it turns out that when you have a significant interaction with a caregiver, you tend to have a very large placebo response. Additionally, a lot of times these studies are things that acupuncture has been shown to help with over time and don't have a good Western cure. So things like irritable bowel syndrome and pain syndromes. And those syndromes are complicated to study in a placebo-controlled type study because they also occur over time. It's a little bit like studying sports medicine or rehabilitation techniques, where there's a lot of interactions. And so you have much less control than if you're just studying someone in a little 24-hour period around surgery or something like that. So we really do get muddled by these large studies where the sham arm still has a good effect, in part because of the actual power and the lack of inertness of the placebo. Another big problem with acupuncture studies is that acupuncture has this really long history, and you have a group of people that see it from a very energetic point of view, from a kind of traditional Chinese medical aspect. And then you have a group of people coming at it from a very Western physiologic basis. Often they end up choosing some similar points and doing some similar things, but the way you would conduct that research is quite different. And so there's this huge scattergram of how people conducted research based on their personal way of practicing acupuncture. Or one person that I know well describes, who's very well trained in traditional Chinese medicine, says, you know, with the Western approach and the traditional Chinese approach, we walk into the same room through different doors. And from a research point of view, that's really muddling. So you get a lot of variety in research. Now, about 12 years ago, a consortium got together on the human acupuncture, medical acupuncture side, and said, we need a standard as to how we perform these studies so that we stop getting such a mishmash of studies. And I think that you'll find out, at least in the North America, Canada, and Europe communities, people that are following those consortium rules are starting to get those results out, and they're much more predictable. So I think you're going to see a change in that overall scattergram of acupuncture studies. And even now, if you reduce your scope to like the last 10 years on PubMed, you're going to find a lot higher quality in those studies. So I think it is something that's changing. I think it's not evidence that acupuncture doesn't work, because I think that you can see how heavily used acupuncture is across the world and realize there must be something there, but that it's more the way we've tried to capture that in our evidence-based medicine pyramid and I think that that pyramid is important. I think that it was designed around surgery and drugs, and it misses some of these other things we do that are more complex, including physical therapy and other modalities that are less one small treatment in a short period of time.
Okay, that's really interesting. I think that many of us would be interested in listening to the podcast and reading those articles. So we'll share the links in the comments afterwards. I don't have them on hand, so Bonnie, you might have to share them with me. And I wasn't able to access that that podcast for free. It was definitely a paid one. So well, so I don't know, but it's not too expensive, so it might be worth it. Otherwise, we'll have to actually have a podcast interview Bonnie and chat about the same things, and then that can go onto the Veterinary Rehabilitation podcast. So, okay, so the kind of research behind acupuncture is being sort of standardized, and we're getting to understand how to test it, right? How to provide evidence for what we're doing a little bit better, which is really exciting. And I love that you've said like there are a lot of interactions and other things at play. And it's kind of one of those questions like, how do I only test how do I only test passive range of motion when my patient needs the whole list of modalities to give them? Like it just would not, I couldn't only do one thing, right? So how do you so a whole range of interactions. I love that. And the placebo thing is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Can we chat a little bit more about that? I think because there's a difference between like a placebo pill that you're taking, which is just a sugar pill, and like sticking a placebo needle in someone or a sham needle in someone. So is the needle having an effect wherever it is, or is there really like sham needling? Yeah.
That's a fantastic question. So yes, any place in the body you stick an acupuncture needle is going to have some physiologic effect, and you can measure that effect. So when you put an acupuncture needle into tissues, the first layer past the skin is connective tissue. And connective tissue is intrinsically a little bit sticky. And it is made, all of that connective tissue is made by fibroblasts that live in the area. And one of the big peripheral mechanisms of acupuncture, or the link between that needle and the nervous system, because acupuncture modifies the nervous system, the link there is the fascia. As you twist that needle, the collagen sticks to the needle and you pull on the fibroblasts. And the job of fibroblasts, everybody that does physical therapy knows this, is to undergo mechanotransduction, to notice when it's being tugged on, getting that physical force of tugging. And then it undergoes a whole bunch of metabolic and even genetic changes. So as you tug on that fibroblast, it becomes activated. It sends out a bunch of chemicals. It talks to nerves in that area, and it tugs on other fibroblasts that live near it. So there are studies by Dr. Langevin over and over through the years, probably going back 30 years now, that show that when you put a needle in, you get that twisting, you get the activation of the fibroblasts, and that starts creating a milieu of chemical changes at the tip of the needle that then ascends the nervous system and creates homeostatic changes throughout the nervous system. That happens everywhere. When you look at the 380 plus acupuncture points in the body, what you find is those defined points are in very neurologically rich areas. And that paper that I told you was one of mine to really jump into the peripheral nervous system by Dr. Zong, was one of the first to say, yeah, look at how different the nervous system is near these points. The points were found by observation, but then when you dissect them, you realize these are really neurologically rich points. And it could be because that's where a deep nerve is first becoming peripheral. So you can first reach a really important deep nerve. It relates to how complex the innervation is at those points. You need to have sympathetic and parasympathetic and somatic fibers, and you need to have like really interesting innervation there. So when you put a needle in near a true acupuncture point, that fascial response that occurs everywhere has a much greater neurologic response than if you put that needle somewhere else. So for sure, a lot of acupuncture research has been muddied by the fact that people used real needles somewhere else and still got a measurable effect from those needles. We now have some functional MRI imaging that shows that when I put a needle in a sham point and I put a needle in a true acupuncture point, the difference that the brain sees is actually fairly dramatic. But we're looking at a body-wide effect. And so if you're just measuring one little thing, which is how we do physiology, you can measure an effect from putting that needle anywhere. And so that really does compound the problem with sham needling. And in fact, this consortium that I told you got together and decided what to study doesn't allow needles put anywhere because those needles are all having a physiologic effect. And so that's not a sham at all. You're actually having an active sham. It just should be a little less active, but comparing the amplitude of an effect is very difficult in these studies. So yeah, the whole sham thing falls into that. So they also have these sham needles that stick to the skin, and the needle, you can't tell, but the needle doesn't really go in. And so the suggestion is to use needles like that because you'll get less physiologic response. But you'll find that the vast majority of papers out there didn't operate that way. So that's one of the big changes that you'll see coming out in modern acupuncture literature.
Oh, that's quite interesting and exciting. I love it. So, guys, if you're just joining us, welcome. We're chatting about acupuncture and really going into the science of it. So that's so amazing. And from what Bonnie is saying here, you can get a really good idea of the level of evidence base that the CRI course is offering. And so that's like, that's what we want, right? That's what we want. We don't want to be studying something that's simple and easy and straightforward. We want to know what's behind it, why we're going to choose something, why we're going to be doing it. So I have one person here who has stuck their hand and said, me, since I'm already involved with veterinary physiotherapy and have already seen the beauty of acupuncture helping many animals, I'd love to acquire a certificate for acupuncture from CRI. So that's awesome. So you've let us know why you want to join, why you would like to do it. If you can, let me know what evidence there is that really gets you excited or gets you thinking. And if it's related to pain and acupuncture, even better, but it doesn't need to be. So another user says, great question and fantastic answer. I can't see who you guys are if you're within our small animal veterinary habits group, but I can see your comments, so that's awesome. So guys, thank you for joining us. If you're a veterinarian and you would like to win a $250 voucher to the CRI course, this is your moment, this is your chance. Let us know in the comments that you're interested, why you would like to do the CRI, the Canine Rehab Institute acupuncture course, why you'd like to get that certification. And May from the Netherlands, hi. So, and also let us know what evidence there is that is exciting to you. We're chatting about evidence this year. We're chatting about research. I really want to get you guys thinking about reading research, about analyzing research, about using it in your clinical thinking and in your practice all the time. It should be just a part of our conversations and everything we do. So if this is not exciting to you, I'm sorry. It's so exciting to me. We've chatted about, okay, so let us know in the comments if you guys are interested. If you want that, give us a shout. Then let's keep chatting about acupuncture. So we've chatted a bit about how the points are different, and that's really interesting. And I know that there are a lot of people who stimulate acupuncture points in different ways, right? So whether it's using a needle or it's using your finger or a pen or a laser, what are your thoughts on that, Bonnie? And is there any evidence that's kind of supports using something other than a needle?
Yeah, so again, another great question. So when you are doing something with other than a needle at an acupuncture point, what we would consider an acupuncture related therapy, you are using the template that those points are neurologically rich points. And so for sure, if you are targeting a therapy to those points, you are utilizing that wisdom, which is, I mean, honestly, in creating a Western scientific understanding of what we're doing with acupuncture, we are utilizing that wisdom that we've inherited anyway, and now we're just explaining it through modern things. And so it's very similar from that point of view. You're using the neurologic underpinnings of that point. Depending on what you do at that point, I think you have some differences between these different modalities. So when I shine a laser light at an acupuncture point, I'm skipping the fascia part of that. I am not pulling on the fascia. I'm not getting mechanotransduction. I am not then linking fascial planes from the foot to the neck or the back or wherever else that fascial plane links. And I'm probably not getting some of the effects at like Golgi tendon organs and muscle spindles. So there's a lot of things I'm not doing, but I am providing photons to a very neurologically rich area. Laser has reasons why it's directly analgesic as well that has to do with nitric oxide. So I'm using the neurologic piece of those points. I may not be using all of the other pieces of it. Some people that practice acupuncture will also inject things like B vitamins. Maybe you're injecting enough to really deform fascia, but maybe you're also doing more just with the neurologic piece of that point. Acupuncture is complex what it does because you're interacting with the entire nervous system. It's part of why it's difficult to get that end-stage study where you're comparing a group of individuals with a sham and a non-sham, because you're modifying their physiology in very complex ways. And I think that when you think about those points and doing things that aren't with a needle, you're still using that. It's just some of the characteristics may be different.
Okay, perfect. So shall we chat a little bit about some of those mechanisms? So I think that in terms of the neurology and the kind of physical response of fascia, we've touched on that. What about a hormonal response? Is there a hormonal mechanism as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of the hormonal response, when you think about acupuncture, one of the things I want you to think about are homeostatic mechanisms in the body, and which are our major homeostatic mechanisms. And obviously pain is an obvious one, and the one we talk about frequently. But the immune system is also a homeostatic system. And the various hormonal systems are similar. So when you think about acupuncture being used to help women conceive or regulate their periods and things, that's one of the very well established uses of acupuncture on the human side in the Western world. So when you take a homeostatic system and try to intervene with that, that's one of the things acupuncture is very good at. And honestly, we do that with our drugs too. We just don't think about it. We're being a little more controlling and maybe a little less modifying when we interact with these homeostatic systems. So part of understanding the hormonal influence of acupuncture is also understanding the link between the parasympathetic nervous system, primarily the vagus nerve, but the parasympathetic system in the sacral region is implicated as well. And that parasympathetic nervous system is actually a critical balancer of your immune system. And so they're now seeing the vagus nerve in particular as being this neuroimmune modulator that really influences our entire immune system. And then immune systems and hormonal systems get very tied together as well. And we've known since the 1970s, really, since we started looking at acupuncture through that more Western lens, that the vagus is heavily involved in a lot of acupuncture points. So especially the ones, if you get on the internet and say, well, which points can we use for immune modulation? And you look at the amount of parasympathetic input to those points, those are points that are much heavier on the basically parasympathetic nervous system. And the immune balance is a really important piece of that. The other thing to realize is I talked about the peripheral compartment and I talked about the nerves and I talked about the fascia, but realize that it's actually the fascia in that peripheral nervous system that creates the lymphatics and the flow of fluid that goes through the lymphatics. So I think we all learned in vet school that every time your heart beats and blood goes through the arterial tree into that little microvascular system, then the fluid goes into the venous side too. But it turns out every time your heart beats, some of the fluid is leaking out. And now that we understand more about the glycocalyx, now I'm turning into the anesthesiologist again, we realize that actually a lot of fluid leaks out every single time your heart beats. And it's all carried up through the lymphatics that form from that little microcirculatory region. Well, that's all fascia. And so fascia is really the home to the lymphatics. And Dr. Langevin, the author that talked about the fibroblasts, has now moved on to studying mostly cancer, because it turns out that the fascia and the lymphatics have a huge influence on the immune system, which makes sense because that's actually where the immune system exists, is within those lymphatics. So that entire compartment is really addressed very specifically by acupuncture, and a lot of the hormonal effects tie into both the parasympathetic nervous system and the fact that the lymphatic system is hosted in the fascia.
That was really okay. That's really interesting. So guys, if you're here with us live, thank you so much for joining us. It's awesome to have you. If you have any questions for Bonny, please ask them. I think this is a great opportunity, so use it. And again, I'm going to repeat. So the CRI has given us this $250 voucher discount, or discounts on the first module of their course, either the one coming up in October or in March next year. And just from what Bonny is saying and what she's, speaking about here, you can get an idea and an understanding of the sort of quality of learning that you're going to get from that module. So it's really exciting, or from the entire certification and course. So I think it's really exciting. And if you are a veterinarian and you are interested, take this opportunity. I think it's amazing. So yeah, I have one more question, but guys, really from you, if you have any questions, now's your chance. So you've spoken quite a bit now, or just touched on the similarities between some of our pharmacologies or medical interventions, medications that we would use for pain management, and something like acupuncture. But what kind of stands out for me, and what I think about when we start to talk about that, especially if we're thinking about kind of chronic medication. So you mentioned like hormone regulation. That's something you're going to be using for extended periods of time, and both in humans and in animals, we're recognizing more and more that these pharmacological interventions, these controlling interventions, have side effects that may only come up many years later, and that we don't have all the answers to. We don't understand how exactly it's affecting our bodies. So if there are similarities, do you think that something like acupuncture or our other interventions that target the same pathways will have similar effects, similar side effects?
I see what you're saying. So I think that one of the things that this gets us into is thinking about chronic pain physiology. And one of the concepts that we've been throwing around for about the last 10 or 15 years is temporal summation, which is the idea that the same pain stimulus becomes more painful to an individual that's in chronic pain. So it's basically the person or animal's experience of pain windup as we've studied it. And it can now be measured, and you can show that this does occur, that pain gets worse over time, and the same amount of pain hurts more to somebody that's in a chronic pain state. And when you talk about pharmacology interacting with that, some pharmacology helps dampen that. Other pharmacology actually makes that worse. So for example, opioids tend to make that wind up, or that temporal summation, worse by actions on the glia. And something like an anti-inflammatory tends to make the pain system less reactive over time, but then it may have these other organ effects, which is part of what you're alluding to as well. And what they can now test is, if I do something that shouldn't be terribly painful to you, do you overreact to that, or do you seem to have a normal reaction? And that's descending noxious inhibitory control, or DNIC. And I believe what we're going to find now that we are able to test this overall kind of pain windup, the basal state of being able to control pain. An example of this, by the way, the descending noxious inhibitory control, is if something hurts, like you just stubbed your toe, and you do something else that hurts, like bite your knuckle. That's a totally different part of your nervous system, and yet it helps you feel better. And the reason is that even though you're not in the same spinal segment where you think about inhibition occurring, the overall body has this ability to inhibit the pain in your toe when you send it information from the pain in your finger, as an example. So now that we can test this, I think what we're going to find is that physical medicine modalities like exercise and like acupuncture probably help the individual to back up that temporal summation and to improve their descending noxious inhibitory control. And from that point of view, I think acupuncture is likely to be very helpful in the long term, as opposed to this idea that sometimes it's years later that we realize we've made the system worse. And to me, that's examples like opioid related drugs, and now realizing how much worse they make pain down the road.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, guys. So because this broadcast has only shared into the small animal vet rehabbers, I want to give the people who are going to be watching on our page the opportunity to also put their hands up and participate in our competition. So over the next few days, we will be announcing the winner and who gets that voucher to the CRI course module on acupuncture. So if you're watching this as a recording, great. Let us know in the comments, share your questions if you have any. And if you want to participate in the competition as a veterinarian, please do so. Let us know why you would love to take the course, why you would love to add acupuncture to your toolbox, and what is the research that gets you thinking and gets you excited. I'd really love to hear that from you guys. I want us to be thinking more evidence-based, more about specific research articles, more about the specific research that's being done and why it's exciting to us, why it gets us thinking. So Bonnie, thank you so much for joining us, and thank
Thanks
you
for having
to
me.
CRI as well for giving us this opportunity. They're one of our sponsors for the VetRehab Summit. If you guys haven't added that to your diary, it's on the 13th of November. It's going to be really exciting, so make sure that you block that off. Go check out the website. Super early bird tickets are available. And yeah, that's it from me. So thank you so much. Thanks, Bonnie.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.